A king survives a brutal war only to face a far greater trial at sea. For 10 long years after the fall of Troy, he wanders across unknown waters, hunted by a god and driven by one relentless desire: to return home. This is the Odyssey, and why it still matters nearly 3,000 years later. Attributed to the ancient Greek poet Homer and composed around the 8th century BCE, the Odyssey is one of the foundational works of Western literature. It is not simply a tale of monsters and magic, but a meditation on identity, leadership, loyalty, and the meaning of home. The poem opens not at the beginning of Odysseus' journey, but in the middle of his suffering. The Trojan War has ended, yet Odysseus has not returned to Ithaca. 10 years of war have been followed by 10 years of wandering. The gods debate his fate. Most wish to see him restored to his kingdom, but Poseidon, god of the sea, burns with anger because Odysseus blinded his son, the Cyclops Polyphemus. Far from home, Odysseus remains trapped on a distant island. And in Ithaca his family waits, uncertain whether he is alive or dead. In Ithaca, the absence of a king has created chaos. Dozens of arrogant suitors crowd Odysseus' palace, feasting on his livestock and pressuring his wife, Penelope, to choose a new husband. They assume Odysseus is dead and see his household as theirs for the taking. Yet Penelope refuses to surrender. She promises to choose a husband once she finishes weaving a burial shroud, but each night she secretly unravels the day's work, delaying the decision through intelligence and patience. Meanwhile, their son Telemachus struggles to define himself in the shadow of a father he barely remembers. Encouraged by the goddess Athena, he journeys to visit other Greek kings who fought at Troy, searching for news. His travels mark the beginning of his transformation from uncertain youth into a man capable of standing beside his father. Even before Odysseus reappears, the poem explores a central theme: the testing of loyalty, the endurance of family, and the slow shaping of identity. Far away, Odysseus is held captive on the island of the nymph Calypso. She offers him immortality if he will remain with her forever. It is a powerful temptation: eternal youth, freedom from aging, escape from hardship. Yet Odysseus refuses. He chooses mortality. He chooses home. At Zeus' command, Calypso releases him, and Odysseus builds a raft to sail once more. But Poseidon sees him and unleashes a storm that shatters the vessel. Clinging to wreckage, battered by waves, Odysseus barely survives and washes ashore in the land of the Phaeacians. There, welcomed as a stranger, he finally recounts the long chain of disasters that followed the fall of Troy. Odysseus first describes raids and misjudgments, including the land of the Lotus Eaters, where some of his men nearly abandon home after tasting a fruit that erases memory and desire. Then comes one of the most famous episodes in world literature: the encounter with the Cyclops. Trapped in a cave by the giant Polyphemus, Odysseus devises a plan. He introduces himself as nobody, intoxicates the monster with wine, and blinds him with a sharpened stake. When Polyphemus cries out that nobody is hurting him, the other Cyclopes dismiss his plea. It is a triumph of intelligence over brute strength. Yet as Odysseus sails away, pride overcomes caution. He shouts his true name to the wounded giant. In response, Polyphemus calls upon his father Poseidon to curse him. That single moment of arrogance ensures that Odysseus' journey will be long and filled with suffering. The poem makes clear that brilliance without humility carries consequences. The trials continue. Odysseus encounters the enchantress Circe, who transforms his men into swine. With divine assistance, he resists her magic and compels her to restore them. What begins as hostility turns into uneasy alliance, and he remains on her island for a year. At her instruction, he travels to the Underworld to consult the prophet Tiresias. There, among the shades of the dead, he meets fallen comrades and even his own mother, who died during his long absence. In the Underworld, glory feels hollow. Even the great warrior Achilles confesses that he would rather live as a servant than rule among the dead. Odysseus learns that survival alone is not enough. Wisdom must guide ambition. He is warned especially about the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios and told that restraint will determine whether he returns home. Armed with knowledge, Odysseus prepares carefully for the dangers ahead. He orders his men to plug their ears with wax when passing the Sirens, whose irresistible song lures sailors to destruction. He alone listens, bound tightly to the mast, desperate for knowledge but physically restrained from acting on temptation. Soon after, he must sail between two horrors. Scylla, a six-headed monster who snatches sailors from the deck, and Charybdis, a whirlpool capable of swallowing entire ships. He chooses the lesser evil, sacrificing a few men to save the rest. Yet tragedy strikes when his crew, exhausted and hungry, slaughter the sacred cattle of Helios despite explicit warnings. Zeus punishes them by destroying their ship in a storm. All perish except Odysseus. Alone once more, he drifts across the sea until he finally reaches home. When Odysseus arrives in Ithaca, he does not reveal himself immediately. With Athena's help, he disguises himself as a beggar and quietly observes the state of his household. He tests servants and measures loyalty. He reunites secretly with Telemachus, and father and son plan together. The once insecure boy now stands as an ally. One of the most poignant moments occurs when Odysseus' old dog, Argos, recognizes him instantly before dying. Time has passed. The cost of absence is visible. Odysseus understands that reclaiming his home will require strategy, patience, and decisive force. Penelope announces a contest. She will marry the man who can string Odysseus' great bow and shoot an arrow cleanly through 12 axe heads aligned in a row. None of the suitors can even string the bow. The disguised Odysseus asks for a turn. Mocked and dismissed, he takes the weapon in his hands and strings it effortlessly. He sends the arrow through the axes with perfect precision. Then he reveals his identity. What follows is swift and violent reckoning. With Telemachus and a few loyal servants, Odysseus slaughters the suitors and restores order to his house. Within the moral framework of the epic, this is not senseless brutality, but the re-establishment of justice and rightful authority. Even after the battle, one final test remains. Penelope does not immediately accept that this man is truly her husband. She tests him by referring to their marriage bed. Odysseus reacts with outrage, explaining that the bed is built around a living olive tree and cannot be moved. Only he could know this secret. With that recognition, husband and wife are reunited. Peace is restored to Ithaca. The Odyssey endures because it speaks to enduring human struggles. The tension between pride and wisdom, the cost of leadership, the longing for home, and the shaping of identity through hardship. Odysseus survives not because he is invincible, but because he learns, adapts, and persists. In the end, the greatest victory is not the fall of Troy or the defeat of monsters. It is the hard-won return home,